It's kind of like, no, the show isn't telling you to go do cocaine and heroin. No, the show isn't telling you to go stay with your abusive boyfriend. No, the show isn't telling you to get an abortion. No, the show isn't forcing you to uh, get drunk all the time and hide with your friends. But it is still giving teenagers that imagery. And
Hi, I'm Espy, and I'm joined by my friend Mickey to talk about Euphoria and our opinions on the show. This is purely our own perspective, and I highly recommend you watch the show on your own and come to your own opinion. Hi, I'm Espy, and I'm here with my good friend Mickey. Say hi.
hello, uh, I'm Vicky.
And we were going to talk about Euphoria. Euphoria has recently come out, and so has many of its controversies, both in the context of the show and within the cast. Have you watched Euphoria?
Uh, yeah, yeah. Season 2 just came out for like New Year's.
Yeah.
But it got more popular again since it just came out. Like the season 2 came out right now.
And what do you think of the show?
I personally love uh, the show. I think it has like great aesthetics, and I love the soundtrack. I feel like Labyrinth, who is one of the main guys who works on the music for the show, he's like he's one of the reasons the show got so popular, in my opinion, because the music is just, it does a lot for the show.
The show has been under scrutiny recently for having an excessive, with air quotes, amount of drug use and nudity. What are your opinions on that?
So this show says in the synopsis on HBO Max, it says it is about a 17-year-old drug addict, right? Which already sounds pretty raunchy, but I feel like having a show about a drug addict is not about a teenage drug addict is not that bad. I mean, Teen Moms was on MTV, right? That's like real people, and they were all over national TV talking about being teenagers that are pregnant. So I feel like having these like mature topics with teenagers isn't like as big of a deal as some people are making it seem, because it does happen, and that's what happens in the real world sometimes, and in suburban areas too, just like in Euphoria. But with the fact that she is 17, I feel like the fact that we see so many explicit, sex scenes, that's when it gets weird, because you don't have to show those, and it can make a lot of people really uncomfortable because these are supposed to be minors. Even though they're 17, almost turning 18, it is still very like uncomfortable.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think that the show really benefits from the shock value? Shock value?
Um, uh, but I mean, it does get a lot of people talking about the show, and that's what you want when you have a show. Of course, is for people to be talking about it, whether it's bad or good attention. But I think the fact that it's about a teenage girl going through, you know, being a drug addict, um, I feel like that can be a pretty interesting topic. But like I said, I don't like the excessive, explicit scenes. They can be very uncomfortable, even for a teenager.
Yeah, I agree. Uh, Many of the actors are. There have been like some people saying that the actors have complained about how many sex scenes there are, and they blame Sam Levinson, allegedly, because this is all hearsay from now on. But what do you think of that? Do you think he's to blame for this, or that he is directly responsible for how many sex scenes are in the show?
Um, well, first off, uh, I do know that he does care about the show. I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but what wasn't he a drug addict himself?
He was. The show is semi autobiographical of his experience.
Yeah, yeah. So I feel like he definitely does care about the show. And I don't feel like he's a bad person. I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt, even though I don't trust a lot of people. I don't think he's a bad person. I feel like bigger people are telling him to put more sex scenes into the show so it's more appealing, I guess, and so it's more adult, even though, they don't need that. Because easily they could just be like, hey, let's have implied sex scenes where they don't actually have sex, it's just implied, right?
Right.
But maybe, let's say this guy isn't that good, right? And he just likes doing this because he's like, oh, well, it just, it looks visually appealing, or I don't know, something like that, which I don't know enough about him to give like a full opinion on it, but it is weird. Yeah, he's a little odd.
I guess that is one way to say it. But recently, with his show, a lot of people have been speaking up about this. Like other actors that aren't a part of Euphoria have been saying that sex scenes and other very explicit scenes in TV and movies aren't like well enjoyed by the actors. A lot of them dislike it. They aren't very comfortable with it most of the time. And not even like the viewers themselves are like sex scenes because they are very uncomfortable to watch. And at this point in time, do you think that like managers and directors will start to like get rid of them or work towards reducing them in their media?
Um. Okay. So. Uh. Yeah. So hold on. I gotta really think about this question.
That's okay. Take your time.
Um. So yes, I think that no, no, they won't. They won't reduce it because the number one term in Hollywood, the number one phrase is that sex sells, right? And there are some weirdos out there who enjoy sex scenes, right? And even though the general public might not enjoy it, it's all about the rich people who give them the most revenue. Do they enjoy it? And like I said, there's some weirdos out there. And yeah, I don't. They, like I said, sex sells. They see that and they're like, this is what teenagers want because in their mind, I'm talking about Euphoria specifically, but in other shows, like it might be a different case. But since Euphoria is for teenagers, not for teenagers, but it's about the teenage experience, right? Obviously, teenagers are going to want to watch the show. And produce like high executives may be thinking, well, teenagers like sex, right? So let's put more sex in here so we can get them to think that this is what the teenage experience is like. And to get them to, for so it can feel more like a teenage experience because teenagers are horny. Even though a lot of teenagers nowadays, and most of the time, I feel like aren't that quote unquote down bad. So that's my take.
I agree. But do you think that the show is responsible for how it influences teens? Because I think it was Sam Levinson, the director, said that he made the show for adults and that is directed towards adults. But in all honesty, the majority of his audience are teenagers and young adults. So do you think it's directly responsible for what teens take away from these situations?
Um, well, that's kind of like the same argument as like if a kid plays violent video games, does that mean the kid is now like learning to be violent from the video games? It's like one of those situations. Like, because me personally, I could watch a show and I could be like, oh man, that's crazy, but I would never do that, right? And I feel like everybody has that choice, except for some people, they take things very literally. But I feel like everybody, the majority, have that choice where they can see it and they can be like, no, I'm not going to do this because a show does it, right? But it is still something to be cautious of. And yes, it does have like warnings in the beginning of it. So I don't think the show is like inherently responsible for that. But you're gonna have one of the most iconic actors ever, Zendaya, in this show, right? Of course, everybody's gonna be wanting to watch it. So you're going to have to be aware that yes, teenagers are going to watch your show because you got a good cast in it, and because this is about teenagers. So obviously, the teenager is going to gravitate towards it. And young adults, which It's like in my mind, young adults are still somewhat teenagers because they're young adults, right? So it's kind of like, no, the show isn't telling you to go do cocaine and heroin. No, the show isn't telling you to go stay with your abusive boyfriend. No, the show isn't telling you to get an abortion. No, the show isn't forcing you to uh, get drunk all the time and hide with your friends. But it is still giving teenagers that imagery and somewhat, I hate to say this, but kind of glorifying these activities because of how aesthetically pleasing they make everything look. Now, I'm not saying that Sam is glorifying his experiences, but like I said, it's kind of like it's because me personally, I like I said, I wouldn't. I watch the show and I don't go out trying to get high and drunk with my friends. You know, so it's. I guess it just depends.
I agree. I was about to ask you about that, whether you think the show does glorify it. And a lot of people on the internet do think so. Some, especially make the note of saying that it is unrealistic and that not all teenagers have this experience where they are always going to parties and they're always getting into these very dangerous situations. And well, I want, as you being an actual high schooler, I want to know what your opinion is.
Um. Uh. I'm gonna be honest. I need you to repeat that question.
Oh, okay, my bad. Do you think that the show is hyper unrealistic, or do you think that the show benefits in any way from being somewhat realistic? Unrealistic, I meant.
um. I feel like yeah, because like if you want to make a drama, right, you gotta make it dramatic. You gotta embellish something, you know. Um, I think yeah, all shows do that. Like I don't think you could ever find a show that doesn't like exaggerate things that are going on. And so yeah, I don't really blame them for that. But it is definitely like when an example would be like when Rue gets high, she has this beautiful eye makeup, right? And yes, they do. I feel like the show is good and bad. So when Rue, the main character, which I don't know, I guess this is technically a spoiler. When Rue overdoses, or when she does drugs, right? We see her at her absolute worst, and she goes through a lot, and we get very uncomfortable scenes when she begs for drugs, or when she breaks her family apart a little bit with her drug habits. Like she exposes her sister to these situations, and it is very uncomfortable to watch, and you really like feel the effects that cocaine has done to Rue. It's really sad to watch. Yeah, it's just uncomfortable inside. But at the same time, like they have this completely beautiful and aesthetic music to accompany when she takes pills or when she does certain things, and the beautiful eye makeup and the beautiful lighting. Like I guess they do it to make it seem like this is what the high feels like to her, right? But at the same time, it is also kind of glorifying the high. And but I feel like it does do a good job at showing you what it's like when you come back down, when you hit the ground really hard, and now you're in the hospital because you overdosed, or now you're in rehab, or you lost somebody that's really close to you, or you hurt the ones that are close to you. I feel like the show does know how to show you like this is what drugs can do to you. Because yes, the high can be extremely high and beautiful, and you can have like a soundtrack that sounds amazing in the background. But when you come down, you come back down like hard. So I feel like it does glorify it a little bit, but at the same time, it does show you bad things.
Okay, so you think that the show definitely does have a balance of very beautiful aesthetics and very uncomfortable, realistic scenes of what happens, like in these terrible situations.
Yeah, I feel like though, like it only does that with Rue because I feel like with other characters, they don't really get that same amount of like attention. I guess like I don't know how to explain it. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do get what you're saying. Can you give like an example of a character?
Um, I'm thinking maybe. You gotta help me out with this one. Think of a character that like you feel like they had like a very hard scene, right? And it felt like the show just brushed over it.
Mm, I guess I'd say Fez's scene. No. Well, yeah. His whole situation seems to have turned out pretty well, and they don't really dive into it very much, is what I assume. But what are your thoughts on that?
Good one. That's a good one. And kind of Bez's like storyline. It like it doesn't glorify his drug dealing because he's a drug dealer, but at the same time it doesn't acknowledge like the trauma he must have endured and the hardships of being a drug dealer. Like you just see him as this relaxed, chilled out drug dealer, right? But that's not what drug dealing is. But I feel like sometimes they do show Fez like kind of break or get frustrated with drug dealing, but not as much as they should, to be honest. But then again, they showed that he always grew up around drug dealing, so it kind of just became something normal to him.
That is true. Yeah.
Which it is that can happen to people in real life, you know, like they get so surrounded with a certain type of environment that it just becomes normal to them, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think there are any other characters who have seen a decent amount of spotlight, but their stories weren't really fleshed out or written in a way that did them any justice for their situation? What comes to mind? Oh,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Wait, hold on. Never mind. Go ahead.
what comes to mind is Cassie, I guess, because she goes through a lot of hardships in her life, but it feels like they don't dive into how she feels about it, or not even. That's not the right way to say it. How she has learned, or how she is learning to respond to things.
Also, sorry, you can hear my sister knocking, I think. But anyways, yeah, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Um, I feel like with Maddie too. Well, oh, you know who's a big character that we should be talking about in the sexualization of like in the glorification of the show is a Cat's story. I feel like her story is kind of forgotten sometimes, and they don't really flesh out the downwards of what she's doing, the bad stuff of what she's doing, right? So like with her, you know, she was doing like porn at 17, which is very at the time she feels empowered because of it, but they don't show you the part where it's like she realizes that she's a victim and that she is being taken advantage of and that this is going to forever mentally like scar her. And I feel like they just they didn't really show you the downloads of her doing porn at such a young age. They just showed you what she felt like when she was doing porn. You know what I mean?
I totally agree. That's an amazing example. Speaking of,
Remember her story all of a sudden.
you've been watching the show for like 3 days.
I've been watching it since it came out. I started the second season like yesterday.
Oh wow.
And that's a good show.
Speaking of Cat, the actress Barbie was recently in controversy with Sam Levinson. She said that she had a falling out with him and that she didn't agree with the way he was handling things and with the scenes that she had. Apparently, he didn't agree with this, and rumor has it that that's the reason she wasn't at the opening, and that's the reason she doesn't have many scenes in the new season. And I wanted to know what your opinion on this was.
Um, what were her? What did she not agree with exactly? Did she say?
She said that she didn't agree with how her story was being taken and the amount of sex scenes or nudity she had.
Mm, okay. Uh, First of all, I feel bad for her. No woman, nobody ever actually should ever have to like feel like that. Like Like they have to like ask for less sex scenes. Um, and second of all, I agree with her because, like I said, she is a minor in the show. Like in real life, she's not a minor, but like in the show, she is a minor, and it can be very uncomfortable. Like imagine being like a 25-year-old, right? Being told you have to play a 17-year-old who has sex all the time, right? That's very uncomfortable for a normal person, right? So I completely like, I get what she's saying. Like I feel like Kat's story should be about how she realizes what she did is extremely wrong and how it greatly affects her, and it's not empowering to do that. Like teenagers shouldn't watch that and be like, oh, it's empowering to go and do porn at such a young age, right? Because it's not. You are still very young, and that can greatly just damage you. And I feel like the story for Kat should just be more about her like figuring out what to do with figuring out how to love herself more and how to see that she is not she doesn't have to do certain things to fit in, or she doesn't have to do or act a certain way to feel better about herself, you know, like she is cared about and loved by her friends for just being who she is, right? And I feel like that's what they should focus on, not her having sex. And that should be what all the characters focus on, is not them having sex. You know?
Yeah, I agree. Well, our runtime is already at like 20 minutes. This is wow. Wow. Yeah. Are there any? No, you are great. Thank you for letting me interview you. Are there any last notes you want to say before we end?
Even though Euphoria has a lot of flaws, I still enjoy the show, and I think what it's trying to say is pretty admirable, and the cinematography is amazing. I feel like the show would just be better if it was made for like college students. I feel like it'd be a little bit better. Yeah, I love Zendaya and Hunter Schafer.
Thank you for watching. This podcast was made in the beginning of the second season, so a couple of our gripes were addressed later on in the series. Again, I highly recommend you watch the show for yourself and see what you think. Thank you for watching.